that keeps me out, right? Which I can understand why, but nobody teacher has done that. It's just like the only reason the teacher is just the only teacher I've gone to Zach's class last year. He's teaching.
All right, boys, you need to start heading to your seat, please.
I think it was just I don't know where it is. I'm not talking about it. I've already made the effort of walking over.
All right, guys, take a seat. It's time to get started here. All right, so if you guys remember on Monday, not the whole class, but pretty close to the whole class, I gave you time to work on the test review, which was number 83, and it was a little bit longer. So I felt like you needed that full class period to have time to work on that. But I did not take questions from it, so I need to give you the opportunity to ask the questions you need to ask. So get out 83, please, and in just a second I will start taking questions a page at a time. We do have our test next class, and as several people have asked me, this is an A week, so I will see you again on Friday, and that will be your test. I have also mentioned, boys, get settled in, please. I've also mentioned that last year this was not a bad test average, but it was the lowest of the semester, and I only point that out to you so that you make sure that you put in a little bit extra effort there, so that that doesn't, you don't feel like you're caught off guard. All right, so what I'd like to do is maybe just take questions one page at a time, and then if I moved on from any too quickly, I will give a chance here at the end. But before I start taking questions, remember there's two things on here that I had typed up. At the start of the review, I typed up all of the different types of questions that we've done. So once you think you are ready for the test, you should probably read through those. And if any of those don't sound familiar, you might look back through there and make sure that you are comfortable with those question types, because they will probably be on the test. And there's a good chance there's a question 2 or 3, a type of questions that you feel like you want extra practice on. So I made these links at the end of the review, short little bit.ly links that would take you to the Khan Academy practice. So if you know you need more practice with limits that use conjugates, completely optional, but feel free to go to that. Practice those questions until you're getting them right every single time and you feel more comfortable. And if you feel great with that type of question, then don't do the extra practice. I just tried to make the extra practice as accessible as possible, because there is a lot of stuff to this unit. So we tried to divide it up where any given day was not too much work, but it does add up to be quite a bit. So on page 1, questions 1 or 2. Is there either one of those two you would like me to go over with you? Everybody's okay with questions 1 and 2? Okay. Page 2 probably has the most, guys, not now. I can't talk up here and think and do the math and listen to what you're saying. Save it for later. Page 2 is questions 3 through 14. So this is probably, every one of these questions is slightly different than the rest, so there's a lot going on here. This review is not meant to give you 20 practice types of every single question, just meant to remind you of some of the stuff that we've done. So was there any 3 through 14 that you would like me to talk about? Yeah.
Could you go over 8, please?
Number 8. Okay, so any limit question If limit is going as x approaches a number and not approaching infinity or negative infinity, you should start with direct substitution, hope that you get an answer. Oh. Sure. Thanks. You're checked out. Hope that I get some number because that would be my answer. But if I plug in 2 and I end up with 0 over 0, this is what we call the indeterminate form. This is the question type that takes more work. So, trying to make this look different. I'll wait and write that. Try to make this look different without changing the size. There's a lot of different things you can do, which is why there's a lot of questions on this page. Sometimes it was factoring, sometimes just direct substitution, sometimes it's a trig identity, sometimes it's a complex fraction, sometimes it's reading a piecewise function, sometimes it's reading a table. There's a lot of different things. But based on how this looks, and based on this square root right here, my guess would be that this would be the conjugate type of question. So if we multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the part that has the square root, so for this question it's the denominator, but it could be the numerator. Conjugate just means switch the middle sign. Then your next step should look like this. So multiplying these conjugates in the denominator gives you that. First part of FOIL gives you 1, outer part of FOIL and inner part of FOIL are going to cancel anyway. That always happens when you multiply something by its conjugate. And then the square root of 3x minus 5 times the square root of 3x minus 5 would be 3x minus 5, but it should be negative because one's positive and one's negative. It's not the 3x that's negative, it's the 3x minus 5 that's negative. I just went ahead and distributed it. Whereas the numerator is x minus 2 times that stuff. In all of these question types, before you can finish off with direct substitution, you need something to cancel. So that's why I'm choosing not to FOIL this. I could FOIL it, but it's going to make it more complicated and harder to work with. I'm just leaving it x minus 2 times this. Okay, now in our denominator, I could rewrite this by combining like terms, and I could factor out a GCF. And now that I've done that, I can see that the x minus 2's cancel. And now that something is canceled, direct substitution will probably work out fine. I would be left with 1 plus 1 over negative 3. So it looks like negative 2/3 for the final answer. I guess you shouldn't have assumed this anyway, but as I put on the agenda, this is no calculator. So don't plan on just graphing this and just looking at the graph. That's a good skill too, but if we want you to do that, that would be like questions 1 and 2, and we'll just provide you the graph. For us to test you on something like this, we have to make it no calculator. So this is what I call the conjugate type of question. So again, at the bottom of the back page, there's that link to the Khan Academy where they probably have like 50 stored up. So if you feel like you need to practice that 5 or 10 more times, then please do, because it'll probably be at least one question on the test. Okay, did you need anything else out of 8? Okay, all right, what else on page 2, 3 through 14? Yeah.
If this is square root, will it always be the conjugate thing? Like, will you always
Not necessarily.
Is there like an example in here?
No, but like let's say this question 11, what if it said that instead? Like here's a square root. That doesn't mean it's a conjugate question.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, this is a lot of work, and this is not my go-to. This is not what I want to do. So to me, this is pretty far down my list. I would only try this because it's not a complex fraction like 12. I can't just do trig identity substitution like number 13. Nothing factors like question 10. And after you start checking out those more common things, Eventually, if you see a square root and none of the other stuff works, it could be that it's a conjugate. Yeah. 13? Sure. Alright, so again, starts and ends the same way. Start off with direct substitution. Hope you get an answer, but if you get 0 over 0, you've got to make this look different. So this would not be like the last question. Conjugates are not going to help you here because you don't have any square roots. This is what I would consider to be a trig identity type of question, because you could factor the denominator with the GCF, but short of that you can't do too much until you consider changing this. So what is cosine squared equal to? Okay, and I think I even have that on your desk still. I probably need to take that off before the test, but so you know how I'm making that change? Okay, now that I've made that change, now it's going to solve like the factoring ones, because the top is the difference of two squares. You've got one being squared on the left and sine being squared on the right, and that's how you get something to cancel, and that's when direct substitution should now work out. We would end up with 3 times 2 on the top over 2 on bottom, so it looks like 3 would be our final answer. So again, not my first go-to, because this isn't the most common type of question, but when I couldn't factor more and conjugates don't make sense and this isn't a complex fraction and I don't have a piecewise function and direct substitution didn't work, basically all the other things that worked on the other problems on this page, you got to consider trying to change the trig functions and make them look different. In this case, cosine squared being the same as 1 minus sine squared. And I don't know if you guys remember, but first semester, the thing that I said was the hardest, those trig proofs, where we tried to make one side look like the other side, that practice really was for stuff like this, to give you some practice thinking about how you could make this look different that could potentially be helpful. It's not like in calculus you really need to just always prove the left side's the same as the right side. It's the experience and the practice of the experimenting and thinking of ways to make it look different that might be helpful, that hopefully helps you with something like that. Okay, I'm going to move on from page 2, but again, if I'm moving too quickly there, I will give another chance at the end. Page 3 had questions 15 through 22. I think 17, 18, and 19 are probably some of the easiest questions on here, but I remember last year those were some of the more commonly missed ones. When we did that topic, again, it only took us like 5 or 10 minutes to talk about it and do all the practice, but if it didn't really stick in your long-term memory, then hopefully you identify that in your practice here. Those should be easy, quick questions. But anything you want to ask 15 through 22? Yeah.
On that test, what do you have with the question 15 that like tells us to like write out each rule?
Potentially. I don't know for sure if there is, but if it's on the test review, it seems like it would be fair game. But I feel like if you can work questions 17, 18, and 19, it's just kind of verbalizing how you know what those answers are. So.
I know, I just like don't. Oh, okay.
Degree of the numerator is bigger than the degree of the denominator. It's y equals 0. Degree of the numerator is bigger than the degree of the denominator. There's no horizontal asymptote. If degree of the numerator equals degree of the denominator, horizontal asymptote will be y equals leading coefficient of the numerator over leading coefficient of the denominator. Easy. I will also say though that I don't know that this is the best strategy overall, but kind of as a backup, if you guys have good number sense, like sometimes you can try to think of this as direct substitution. If I try to plug this in on this question, which one of these is growing faster, the numerator or the denominator? And what happens in a fraction if your denominator is getting bigger? And so it approaches what number? 0. So if your numerator is relatively staying still, but your denominator keeps getting bigger, do you see how that gets closer to 0? I mean, that's the same thing. You can apply the horizontal asymptote rule, and or you can understand that this denominator is growing way faster than the numerator, and in a fraction, when your denominator is growing faster, it's going to get closer and closer to 0 the bigger x gets. Similar idea for this one. If you look at number 18, if you just try to think of this as direct substitution, when you're talking about really, really, really big numbers, this other stuff just doesn't matter. Like, it moves the needle a tiny bit, but the stuff with the biggest exponent matters the most. So these two are basically growing at the same rate, because they both are a third degree. So it ends up approaching -1/4. Does that make sense if you think about it that way? But you should still know the horizontal asymptote rules for the ACT, so I don't know. I'm just trying to provide an alternate way to look at those. You could do the same thing for 19. The numerator is going faster, so that fraction is going to infinity, so infinity or negative infinity, just say do not exist. Okay, the next page would be 23 through 26. And I guess there's only 2 questions on the back page, so let's just take any of those. Anything 23 through 28 that would help out by me going over it. Hello? Sure. Thanks. You checked out. You hanging out with Crawford or something?
No, I gotta get this thing before basketball.
Okay, 23 through 28. Okay, then anything from any page that I moved on too quickly from? I will remind you that when we started this unit, pre-calculus. No. Okay. All right. So what? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Cold as hell.
But for those of you picking Cal AB next year, remember that this is about 95% of the first unit next year, and we do it in 2 weeks, where the first day is the first day of school, and you know, you're finding your classes and going over syllabus and getting textbooks checked out, and then at the end of 2 weeks we test on it. So if you're signed up for Cal AB next year, you should want to study well for your test grade here, but also try to actually learn it so that next year you don't start off stressed out in calculus. Again, I think there's a couple little things, but this is really the bulk of the first 2 weeks of calculus. We spent quite a bit more time on it to make it a little bit easier on you, but all right, if you guys do change your mind, of course, please let me know. As always, I would recommend you maybe retry the questions you thought were the hardest the first time to make sure that it really sank in. I should have a bunch of extra copies of the test review that you're welcome to over there. They just get trashed anyway. Those would be in the binder. I know I have tons of, not every question, but tons of these are worked out as videos on the website. So it could be beneficial to hear it explained out again another time or two. And maybe after you do all that and turn it in, if there's something you know is a weakness of yours, you guys have some class time to move forward on that you don't have to do as homework. So based on today's bell schedule, you are dismissed at 3:20, which is exactly 60 minutes from now. So you've got 1 hour of time that should go in towards your studying. So hopefully you don't even need that long, but 60 minutes of studying should help out quite a bit. Let me know when and where how I can help, please.